My dear brothers and sisters, it's such a great delight that Rajiv Malhotra ji has been able to spare some time. We had a very nice interactive meeting for 1.5 hours now. And without spending more time, I just request him to give his thoughts for maybe 15-20 minutes. Then we can have the questions, interactions. We can start off. Over to Rajiv.
Namaskar. This is my first visit to this very distinguished institution doing pioneering work. I have known Dr. Nagendraji for a couple decades, 15-20 years, and been an admirer of his work, and we've become friends over a long time. And we just finished a 1 hour, 10-minute private interview we did in another place where we went into great details, which will be put up on the air, talking about yoga, Ayurveda, relationship with modern Western science on the one hand, and with the Vedic tradition on the other hand. This is a very interesting discussion. If you leave your email ID on a piece of paper, we'll put you on our list, and when this goes live, we'll send you a notification. You can also join my list by going to rajivmalhotra.com, and there it says contact us. If you click that, you can send a note and we will put you on our mailing list. That way you will have access to all the talks going on and my previous talks also. The main point, a few points I want to make are: how do you locate the yoga, Ayurveda traditions on the bigger canvas of civilization? How does it relate to our civilization? What are some differences with Western and other kind of civilizations? And to what extent are our traditions of yoga, Ayurveda compatible with those other civilizations? To what extent they're not compatible? This is something I want to talk about because I feel that clarity is needed in this area. First, I want to say that our civilization is one of the only very old ones that has survived. Despite the big expansion of Abrahamic religions, our civilization has survived, even though it may have been damaged and diluted in various ways, but the Shastras exist. Most of them have still survived. Some are destroyed and we don't know. And the people who are practicing them, they're around. And now there's a revival, thanks to people like the pioneers in this institution, who are reviving the Shastras, putting it to empirical test, scientific test, and giving the benefits to the population. Now, one of the issues I focus on researching is something I call digestion. Digestion means when our civilization gets digested into the West. It becomes converted into somebody else's framework because they can't accept the whole thing. Maybe the whole framework, they can't accept reincarnation, or maybe they can't accept karma theory, or they can't accept nakshatras, or jyotish, or vastu, or they can't accept the nature of the self, the panchakoshas, or they can't accept the gunas or the doshas. Some part of the metaphysics or the physiology that our tradition is based on is unacceptable to others because they have a different system. And yet, they know that what we are doing is right, it's producing benefits. They want the benefits, but they don't want to subscribe to the whole system. So what happens in a case like that is they pick and choose and adjust, distort to make it fit their framework. This is like, let's say there's a medicine and the medicine has to be taken with certain diet, certain precautions, and some things have to be avoided. And let's say I want the benefit of the medicine, but I don't want to take those precautions. I don't want to become non-veg or non-alcoholic, even though the person giving their medicine says that you should avoid those things. So I don't want to make some changes in my philosophy, in my thinking, in my lifestyle, but I want the benefit. So I try to fudge it, I try to fake it, I try to fool myself, I try to pretend it doesn't matter. So I'm mixing things that are not legitimate. Same way, yoga has gone all over the world, but in many places there is a tendency to distort it in order to make it fit their own ideas. This distortion is a way to digest it into their system of thinking. And this topic is a very big topic. Ayurveda getting distorted into Western systems, yoga getting distorted, and many, many other things getting distorted in order to digest them into the West. And then they lose the links with the Indian source, then they are no longer authentic, and even our own people get confused because what the West is doing we also think must be correct. Even on our own culture, we often follow what the West is saying. We think they must be correct because we have an inferiority complex. So this is a problem for me, and I'm very interested in promoting and advocating a revival of our civilization based on our own terms, not as somebody else sees it, but our own authentic terms, and doing a scientific validation. So the issues that we discussed this morning in the interview were about how the Western science sees Ayurveda and Yoga, and are there parts of it which it cannot accept, and what do we do? Do we assert ourselves, which is what I think we should do, or do we compromise and eliminate things just because we want to make somebody else happy? And then the second part of the question was, how do yoga and Ayurveda fit in with the Vedic civilization? And is the Vedic civilization required to properly understand and get benefits of yoga and Ayurveda, or can we do away with it? I think we concluded that at a superficial level, you can practice yoga and Ayurveda and get simple benefits, backache, and solve your cholesterol. These kind of very physical, mechanical benefits can be achieved, regardless of whether or not you are complying with the entire ecosystem of Vedic lifestyle. But once you get into a deeper level, then the required diet becomes important. The ideas of karma become important, because karma influences your mind, your psychology, what thoughts come natural to you, and that affects your body. So these things do matter. And once there is karma, you cannot get away without a reincarnation, because the karma theory is linked with reincarnation in a very central way. And also the nakshatras, the astrology, the jyotish, these kind of things are important. So as you get deeper and deeper into the practice of yoga and benefit of Ayurveda, you also find that the bigger and bigger parts of the Vedic structure, the Vedic thought process, get involved. This then raises the question, how do we respect other religions who don't believe in these things? I think since the practices of yoga and Ayurveda emerged in a culture, a Vedic culture, for a long period of time, they are based on the Vedic culture. And if somebody wants to remove this culture as a soil and replace it with something else, then they have to test everything again. So if somebody says, okay, I don't want to think of karma, reincarnation, then they really have to do a long-term study, not just 5 years, 10 years, but very long-term study to see if, in fact, removing these premises will compromise. They need to test it. They can't just assume it is the case. They have to test it. And that test may be positive, the test may be negative, but it has to be done. As things stand, we know the validation of these practices within a Vedic philosophical system. And somebody who wants to do it in a non-Vedic philosophical system then has the burden of proof to validating the whole thing again. So this is why I feel uncomfortable when people translate the Sanskrit words, like pran can't be translated as breath. It may be one aspect of it. And Agni is not just fire. There's Agni in your stomach also, the digestion. There's so many levels of Agni. So because the Sanskrit words have many levels of meaning, even you translate into something simple in English, it tends to destroy that multi-layered, broad range, broad spectrum approach to the Sanskrit words. So I prefer not to let that happen. And when it comes to the relationship, whether yoga and Ayurveda are located in Vedic per se, or whether they can also be available to other people, the answer I prefer is that everybody can get the benefit, but they have to comply with the lifestyle. They have to comply with the basic metaphysics, which is part of the tradition. Everybody can comply. And I don't think they should feel that their religion is being attacked or compromised, because our system is very open. It's an open architecture. Everybody of any faith can subscribe to these ideas. It's up to them to choose. We can't impose it on them. They have to choose whether they wish to do so or not. So that's a simple kind of an overview of my talk. What I'll do is, we got a few questions, and I will go through some of the ones that I'm able to understand and answer them. And if there's time left, then they can also ask questions, further questions. So one says, what is the need of salvation? Well, it depends on how you define salvation. The word salvation comes from a biblical context. And in that context, in the Christian idea, salvation means salvation from sin. So you have to understand what the Bible says about sin and decide whether that is something that, is consistent, compatible or not. So sin comes from something Adam and Eve do in the Garden of Eden. They commit sin, they disobey God, and they do something wrong, and that is called original sin, capital original sin. And then God condemns them by saying that all your progeny, which means all the people born, your children, grandchildren, all that, all the people born from you, will be condemned to hell, condemned to damnation in hell. And this is the problem of sin. According to the Bible, every person is born sinner. And so then Jesus comes and offers them salvation by believing in him. And this is the one and only method possible in the Bible. This is the one and only method possible because he's the only son, and he's been sacrificed to help you remove your sin because he sacrificed and for you. So this is the narrative, very clear, very uncontroversial. Everybody accepts it. So salvation is applicable if sin is there. But in our system, there is no sin per se. In the Vedic system, there is no sin per se in that sense. The nature of the person is not sinner. The nature of the person is divine. The nature of the person is the Panchakoshas. So the person, the tattva, the essence of a person is not one that requires salvation. So my answer to it would be based on the tradition I know, in which there is no problem which requires salvation. We require moksha, which is a different thing, which is not because of sin, but because of ignorance. So in a system of karma and reincarnation, we've gotten entangled with the wrong actions, with the wrong sanskars, and so we need release from that state, which is not the same thing as salvation from sin, because sin cannot be translated as pap and punya. The system of papa, punya is not something that translates into sin. It has different connotations. And the idea of swarga can't be translated as heaven. There are different translations. And we don't have a hell per se. There's no Satan or devil. So the whole metaphysics on which the concept of salvation lies is not a metaphysics that I'm using in or is used in the Ayurveda yoga system. Next one is why yoga is not getting infused into people's life despite huge benefits it has. I think it is being infused. I think the work Vyasa is doing, the government is doing, Ayush, it is being infused. It will take time. I mean, there was a period of several centuries during which it was ignored, destroyed. New research was not being done. Universities were destroyed. Many of the Agama Shastras and other Shastras are not available because they were not they were abused and thrown out. And so we've had colonialism. to replace our systems with Western medicine and so on. Only very recently we started reviving these. I think the revival is going quite rapidly. So I would say you just have to be patient. Hopefully in the next 5-10 years, a substantial portion of Indian population will be practicing these things. That's my hope. What is the basic difference between Indian and Western culture? Which is better? I won't tell you which is better, but I wrote a book called Being Different. The title is Being Different. That is my 400-page analysis on what are the differences between Indian civilization and the Western civilization. And those of you who are very serious readers should go up and buy that, get that book, download it or get it, Being Different. Basically, the differences that I talk about are that in the Abrahamic systems, the problem of sin and salvation and then heaven, hell are very different from our concept of the manifestation of beings and where they're headed in the future, the moksha idea and so forth. So the basic structures are very different. In the Western system, there's a huge reliance on a very unique historical event that happens. It never will happen again. It never happened before. It didn't happen anywhere else in the world. It only happened in the Middle East. It happened once to one person. And so we have to believe in that particular historical event. Whereas in our system, there is no one unique historical event. Time is cyclical. Similar events happen to many big exemplars, many avatars. So because it happens many times, many places, we don't resist knowing, we don't resent if somebody says it happened to some African person, it happened to some Native American or a Chinese. It will not devastate us because the requirement that it happened only once uniquely is not there. So this changes the entire belief structure because we are more open. And also another very big difference is that we are not an expansionist civilization. We are more content with ourselves. We haven't had a history of conquest or going to other places to forcibly convert them or tell them that you're no good, we're better. We have a live and let live philosophy, which says we are how we are. We're following our tradition, and you are free to follow your tradition. What's good for you, you can decide. We are not here to tell you that you're wrong. And we haven't been conquerors even when we were very prosperous and very powerful. We've tended to remain at home ourselves. And the Western civilization is actually built on a lot of expansion, not only throughout Europe and then Africa and then the American continent, North and South Americas, but also Asia, large parts of Asia. So there are those differences. Which is better? The Western our civilization is based on a Vedic heritage, which is now reviving in a big way. Western civilization is based on Judeo-Christianity and then modernity, modern science, modern technology. Both have had their advantages. West is borrowing a lot of things from us. We are borrowing a lot of things from the West. It is good for people to get the best out of each other, which is, I think, what is happening. And we should hang on to the uniquenesses and strengths of our civilization because it's an export commodity. There's an economy. The West is benefit by exporting its civilization, its cultural products. They make money on it. They have good patents and copyrights. There's no reason we should not respect our tradition the same way. Chinese medicine is a very, very big international market controlled by China, Chinese medicine. It is, I think, 5 times or 10 times the size of Ayurvedic medicine market. Huge. You can look at the numbers. And the Chinese government controls it. Now we have Modi government wanting to do the same for Ayush, which is a very good thing to do. But China has been doing this kind of thing for 30, 40 years. So therefore, every civilization wants to protect what are the advantages, what is unique. And you can't say that one of them is best in every way and one of them is worst in every way. They all have their advantages, and we should know what are our advantages. Next one is if yoga is about personal control, how can it help in interpersonal control? This is very good. If yoga is about personal control, how can it help in interpersonal control? Point is that if I'm not personally controlled, I'm an out-of-control person, I'm too angry, I have too many emotionals, I have fear, I'm whatever. If I'm out of control of my own feelings, thoughts, emotions, and so on, then all this will be dominating in my relationship. Whereas if I'm a person who's more yogic, calm, less stressful, more loving, it will also improve my relationships. So this practice of the inner self, becoming a better inner person, healthier, less stressful, also then improves the relationships with other people, not just human beings, but animals, nature, environment, society, more compliant with the laws of the country. So people with a better, deeper yogic practice will become better citizens. You will not find them terrorizing or going into violence or hatred. They'll become loving people. So in your family relationships also, there's an improvement. In your office environment, people who've been practicing these things, there's an improvement. There have been studies on yoga in the prison system. Even hardcore violent criminals who come and live in the prisons, once they are put into the yoga, after a while they become gentler, less violent, more peaceful, happier people. So the effect on relationships is in family, in work, in society, everywhere. Is it justified to say that yoga is for all religions? Isn't it Hindu-centric? Okay, so yoga. So let's forget the word Hindu, Christian, Muslim, Jew, Buddhist for 5 minutes, and we come back, or maybe for 1 minute. Let's just say yoga, like any medical system, requires certain prerequisites, do's and don'ts. You should have certain diet, you should have certain beliefs, you should have certain kind of lifestyle. And that is not about religion, but anybody can subscribe to those things. So yoga does believe that the karma system. Yoga does believe in the influence of nakshatras. Yoga does believe that the person who's practicing is multiple koshas. Anyone of any religion can start accepting these things, and yoga will work. It's like any medicine. If you take penicillin, they want you to take certain things with it and not take certain things with it. So they say, drink a lot of water, don't take alcohol, like that. So anyone of any religion can follow and be okay. Similarly with yoga, being the scientific thing, and Ayurveda, if you follow all the do's and don'ts, then you're okay, regardless of religion. But some religions may have a problem complying. That's their problem. It's not our problem. We are not restricting them. We are not restricting a person from becoming vegetarian. They may have a problem because they're required to be a non-veg. That's their problem. It's like I made penicillin and I told you eat these items, don't eat these items. And it's available to everybody. It's universally available. Now a person may say, I don't want to follow this guideline, this lifestyle, but I want to have penicillin. Then I will say it may harm you, it may not do you any good, it contradicts your choices. So it's not yoga and Ayurveda that are imposing any religious constraints on anybody. It is those people who reject the yoga, Ayurveda requirements. That's their problem. And we can't say it's not for all religions. It's for all religions to decide whether they want to become yogis and follow the rules of yoga. So I would say that's a better answer than it is Hindu or not Hindu and so on. Yoga has its own metaphysical requirements that you should believe in that kind of a worldview, and it has lifestyle requirements, certain processes that you should do, certain things you should avoid, and everybody is invited to follow. So some Christians will say we can do it, some will say we are not allowed to do it, some will say we can Christianize it and call it Christian yoga and do it. Those are the choices they're making. As far as yoga is concerned, it's very clear what are the do's and don'ts within the yoga system. Okay, so is there any connection between Hindutva and nationalism? So this is not really a topic of my discussion here. This is a different kind of a political topic. It's not a topic about yoga, Ayurveda, science and so on. It's a topic, I've written a lot about it, but I think in order to focus on the science of healing and yoga and its relationship with spirituality and Western science, it's better that I just focus on the questions that are directly related. Okay, it says Indian civilization has been great, so what happened to it that some invaders came and became rulers, then English people ruled us, and still we are divided on caste and religion. We are one of the most corrupt nations. Disparity in society is increasing. Where do you see this continue 30, 40, 50 years in the future? Well, the issue of caste, I don't think can be, issue of caste is a bad thing and we ought to get rid of it. But you know, if you look at the race relations within America, it's pretty nasty. It did not prevent them from becoming a great country. And if you look at China, the way they will treated the Tibetans, almost genocided them, and many other ethnic groups that they have oppressed, it did not prevent them from becoming a powerful country. And you look at Germany before, 150 years ago, and you look at France before the French Revolution. I mean, you could look at many successful big societies, and their internal social structure has been very complex, but it did not prevent them from becoming great. So that cannot be, you cannot isolate that and say that's the reason. And then disparity in income, you'll find a huge amount of disparity in income in a lot of very successful countries. In fact, had less disparity of income because they had made the rich less rich. And they created like a uniform society under communism, but it collapsed. Whereas in the United States, the disparity between rich and poor is huge. Okay, but the economy is so many times bigger than the Soviet economy was. So I don't think that disparity of income, while disparity of income is bad for other reasons, disparity of income, we ought to try and level the playing field for everybody. I have my own thoughts, if you want, how we should level the playing field. My thoughts are that inheritance laws should be changed. When I die, that money should go to causes. It should not go to my children. That's how I would change the disparity. I would say let a person accumulate as much money as he can properly, legally, in an ethical, proper way, and enjoy the big life. But when he's dead, it's not continued in his family dynasty. That will level the playing field very quickly because everybody would start their life equal and not depend on how rich or poor your parents were. So change the inheritance laws. Just 100%, if I would be very radical, I would say that my kids should earn on their own, and just like I had to earn everything on my own. So I would get rid of that. That would solve everything. It's like these new notes, old notes, big revolution. I would say suddenly if somebody said no more inheritance, or and everybody is looked at, the quota system depends nothing to do with your caste, jati, or anybody else, but your own financial situation. Those who are in more need will be given some special help. Those who are not in need will not be given help. It has nothing to do with religion or caste or anything. It has to do with the individual circumstances. So if we made government help entirely dependent on individual circumstances and no such thing as inheritance, you'll solve all these problems. It really has nothing to do with what religion you are, and it's nothing to do with being Hindu or not Hindu. So my diagnosis of the problem is different than the question seems to imply. Then regarding the invaders coming, these things have a very complex history also, because being a very large, complex, decentralized country, India was able to sustain itself, survive the onslaught of invaders for hundreds of years. But at some point in time, it didn't continue working. And so once that backbone was broken, then the invaders went deeper and deeper and put the whole thing fell apart. And we became a nation of basically servants, slaves, working for dominant culture, feeding them, making them rich. And now we're trying to get back. So we need to get a proper understanding of Indian history in order to realize what went wrong so we don't do that again. That's I think, what we ought to do. I think these are the main questions. Can you please laws of nature? Elaborate. Can you please elaborate laws of nature? See, in the classical sense, laws of nature are physics and biology. There's laws of nature concerning the living beings. There's laws of nature concerning the non-living, non-living entities. That's sort of the laws of nature. In the Vedic system, they're not laws, because laws require somebody outside imposing the law. Lawmaker. In the Western system, there is God is a lawmaker. He gives the laws and makes the laws. And then he imposes, gives you punishments and he gives you commandments. We have a manifestation system. The Vedic system is that the one manifests as many, and in order to manifest as many, there are certain patterns which seem like laws, but there are certain patterns that nature follows. So there are more patterns of behavior. Electrons follow a pattern of behavior, trees follow a pattern of behavior. We don't necessarily need to call them laws, but it's the nature of reality. So that's, and then our tradition gives very elaborate understanding on the non-living and living aspects of nature. And those are that you may think is equivalent to what the West would call the laws of nature. Here it says, where do thoughts come from? Are they external or internal? See, the idea of mind and thoughts is very complex. Some thoughts come from memory. You have a thought, you have thought of something and it just keeps coming back. Some thoughts generated from external. I'm looking at this tree, I get an idea. I get this bird, I get this idea. So, thought is a combination of prior thoughts that are recalled and that generate new ideas and new sensory input. I'm going somewhere, something suddenly happens, I have to deal with it. So thought, the mind is the whole theory of mind is a very detailed, elaborate structure that I'm sure you'll study here. It's not a very simple answer, binary answer, are thoughts internal or external. They are influenced by both. There is the internal influence of memory, sanskars, deposits that I have in me that influence what I think about, what I'm interested in, what I find more curiosity about. And also externally, I mean, you were talking to me, I respond by giving you some thoughts. So it is not in either or, but a combination. Here it says, if Atma remains the same and not destroyed, and only changes from body to body, why couldn't we recollect and remember memories from previous births? Okay, so first of all, there is Atman, there is Jivatman. Okay, the Atman is one thing, it doesn't change, but there is the Karan Sharir, all the actions you've done, all the karmas you've created, that database sitting in the cloud or sitting somewhere, the Atman and that together are the Jivatman. So this is the unit that is looking for a new womb to be born in upon my death. This is looking to be matched with a new womb to create a new creature according to its needs, according to its unsatisfied cravings, and according to its karmic potentials and karmic tendencies. Now, at that point in time, conscious memory isn't there. I don't remember the way I remember yesterday what I was doing. I don't remember that after death in my new life. But certain tendencies I have are because of my past behavior. They are memories in the sense that they influence my life. I may have some tastes, I may have some desires, I may be lucky, unlucky, I may be tall, short. So those effects are there. But I may not remember. So there is unremembered consequences. I may not remember the consequences. Now, there are people in very advanced states of consciousness through yoga who are able to remember that. You have great yogis who've remembered many, many past lives, details of many, many past lives. We don't even use more than 2 to 5% of our brain. We don't use that. So we use a very tiny part of our brain. The rest of it is dark and dormant. And then the neuroscientists tell you that as your consciousness level goes up, as you have a higher and higher state of consciousness, a greater percentage of the brain becomes used. So we are not using all the faculties. One of them is being able to recall these sort of things. I have only a couple left. Then it says Hindu caste and untouchability. It's not Hindu caste and untouchability. So let me elaborate. We have a Varna system and we have a Jati system. There is no Hindu caste system. The word caste itself is the Portuguese word called casta. And when the Portuguese came, they described Indian society based as caste. And then a couple hundred years later, in the 1800s, British started a census of India in which they wanted to profile the castes in a hierarchy and fix them. And so this caste system that we know today was created. The caste system, as it exists today, rigid, you are of this caste, this is your status, wasn't there before. For instance, we had Shudra kings. I don't know how many of you know that. We have dynasties of kings who were Shudras. So the idea of a Shudra was different because they were kings also. How else would they be kings? There's hardly ever in the Indian history a dynasty of Brahmin kings. Please find me one. They were not Brahmin kings. This is important. So we have these weird ideas of history that we've been given by the colonizers, and since we are still colonized, we continue with these, and it serves some political purpose to divide people up into this or that group. I want you to tell me a single dynasty of Brahmin kings. A Brahmin couldn't be the king. If he were to become a king, he would have to resign. He had to resign as Brahmin. Very rarely you will find that. But there are a lot of Shudra dynasties, not just one king here and there. So this idea, and one of the things I studied was history of science and technology in India. And I looked at history of metallurgy, history of surgery, history of agriculture, history of, textiles. Some of the very wealthy communities were people who are now classified as OBCs and scheduled caste. But you go back a few centuries, these same communities were in a manufacturing economy doing exceedingly well. So why do certain jatis become less prosperous? What happens to the economy? It is not anything to do with Hinduism. It's today the Patels are very rich because the motels, they own a lot of motels in the world. Motels are a very thriving economy. And fishermen in Nagapattinam village are very poor because that fishing economy is not a very thriving economy. Most of the world fishing is done by massive ships, big multinationals. So some group of people fishing are not able to make a whole lot of money. But that necessarily is nothing to do with their religion. I mean, that's a professional specialization which they have, and that particular profession is not doing well, or some other profession is doing very well. If you look at the history and economy of a certain specialized profession, you will find that it has changed over time. People who are into some textile, in one period of history they are very rich, in another period of history they're very poor. And then there is labor gets displaced. Communities get displaced, they have to go wandering around looking for jobs because they got conquered, they lost their land, they became slaves of somebody. So you will find that if you start tracking the histories of today's so-called low caste, several generations back, they were jatis, some of them were very prosperous jatis at that time. So this idea that there is this Hindu caste system, I defy you to tell me where in Hindu texts prior to a few centuries there is the word caste at all. There is the word varna and there is the word jati. We can discuss these. And each jati, from the poorest jati, has its own varnas. There is people doing labor in a community. There is people who are thinkers. There are people who are money lenders, who are doing finance. So all the occupational varnas are present in every jati. I mean, you won't find a single jati in India which did not have its own goddess and a priest. Now, if this is a very poor jati, if it's a poorest jati and they have a goddess temple, there is a priest who is doing worship. So the equivalent of a Brahmin is that guy, even in this poorest jati. So there is no jati. Traditionally, we did not have a situation where the whole jati is all Brahmin, another whole jati is all this, and another whole jati is all that. The jati as a community had an occupational specialty. So there may be musicians who are jati, but they got their own spiritual tradition also. They would also build their own temple. There would be some other community which has their own profession, and that profession is makes their jati identity. So jati was more a professional specialization, occupation, created an identity. They tended to marry within. They tended to propagate the knowledge to their own children. That's because of lack of public school. Today, your children and poor man's children, rich man's children, if they go to a regular neighboring school, they're all sitting together. They're all learning the same thing. But in those days, knowledge was transmitted in the home. We did not really have that much schooling available outside. So a lot of the knowledge being transmitted at home tended to make the children continue the parents' specialty. So if you're born fishermen, then you learn to be fishermen because you're helping your dad with his fishing net. If you're a tabla player's son, then you're playing with the tabla since you're 2 years old. If you are a singer's son, then you learn to become a singer. Occupation transmission is easier, and this is true in all societies. It's true in Western societies also. You take a name like Smith in England. Smith comes from blacksmith. They were blacksmiths doing blacksmith work. A lot of occupational specializations have existed in most societies. The tendency to continue occupation by birth breaks when there is education, which is large-scale education, large-scale media, and everybody gets the same education, regardless of parents. Then you'll find that within one generation, people are being produced who pick up occupation nothing to do with the parents. So today, how many people are truly following the traditional family jati occupation? You'll find, you go to temples, Hindu temples, one of their biggest complaints is that their son don't want to be a temple priest, they want to learn IT and go to America and drive a BMW. This is what they'll complain about. And so you have Dalits who are billionaires. People from Dalit families, I'll give you a list of 50 of them, who are billionaires. So the idea of continuity of a particular social status is breaking because of mobility through education, mobility in jobs. This is breaking. But politically, keeping the caste alive as a vote bank by giving them quotas is what is perpetuating the problem. Because you give anybody quotas, left-handed, I'm a little bit left-handed for some things. If you give a left-handed quota, we organize left-handed political party and we start blaming right-handed people for oppressing us. And then you have a quota for bald people, and then you have a quota for people with eyeglasses. You can just keep making all kind of confusion and divisiveness. That is the problem, not a Hindu caste system, because there never was a Hindu caste system. And the caste system that the British created for their own reason, Indian government upon independence in the constitution should have thrown it out. Should have said that we will give preference, job and other financial and educational preference to individual who is underprivileged based on these 2, 3, 4 criteria, family, income, this or that, whatever. And within a couple of generations, we would have equalized everything. But by legalizing the caste system as a permanent thing, we created a weapon for politicians to exploit people and divide them up. So I think it is not a Hindu caste system, it is an Indian democracy, political exploitation caste system. So, yeah, maybe what I'll do is I'll stop here, because I have only 1 or 2 left anyway, and we'll take audience questions. Okay, now for the audience questions, you need to have it recorded also.
Short and to the point. Come over here for the one reason
but
that
we don't have a mic.
We have a mic here.
That mic only.
Yeah, that'll do. Oh, that'll not
have this mic.
Oh, it's there? Okay. Fine.
Is it coming there?
Okay. So.
Okay, it's going through the mixer? Okay. Then I don't need this? Okay.
That also.
Just to be on the safe side.
Okay.
Namaste, sir. My name is Sheetal.
Your name is?
Sheetal Pawar.
Sheetal.
Yes.
Okay.
I have a question. How do we strike a balance between our spiritual goals and career goals?
Can you speak slowly? I don't understand.
How do we strike a balance between spiritual goals and career goals concerned to yoga.
Beautiful. How do you strike a balance between career goals and spiritual goals? I think the two go together. I think it's a bad teaching that a spiritual person should be giving up everything and become some fellow sitting in a cave somewhere, not pursuing a profession and not wanting to be materially happy and healthy. I think that's a wrong idea. A spiritual person has to be fulfilled, has to have a good body, has to have a good health, has to have a career, has to be balanced. And conversely, to be successful in your career, you have to be spiritually grounded. You'll be a happier person, more relaxed, better relationships in the home, better relationships in your workplace. Spiritual people are making better students. You do yoga, it helps your performance. So I don't think that there is a choice, that there is an opposition or tension between choosing spirituality and choosing a profession. You don't ask a question like, which is better, should I be brushing my teeth and keeping my body clean, or do I do my homework? I mean, you don't ask that because obviously you do both. So to put spirituality as a part of your life is not such a big burden that you can't be a professional at the same time.
Namaste, Rajivji. My question is something related with yoga.
A little bit further. Yeah.
In one of your books itself, you are identifying there is an accusation by the Western, which is called Neo-Hinduism, which says that this yoga postures and other things, what we practice, particularly in Ashtanga or Iyengar and other systems, is just an imitation of modern gymnastics of Western. I think for our general audience, can you just say like how you are countering that? And,
so first I'll tell you the problem for the general audience. Thank you for reminding, it's a good question. The history of yoga is now being considered by Westerners to be not Indian origin. There is a man called Singleton who wrote this book where he says that BKS Iyengar's guru learnt it from YMCA, and the British had these drills to keep the body healthy, and Indians were very weak, could not do all those very strong things, so they came up with very easy things and gave them Sanskrit names to feel very proud, and that is how yoga started. This has become a bestseller. This book has gotten awards. The guy has been invited to India by some important universities and toured around. Our people are so ignorant. As long as it's a white man who can talk a little bit nicely about India and praise and whatnot, they'll invite him, but they haven't really read in detail what he's all about. So this kind of a distorted origin of yoga has become popular, and a lot of Indians also promoted such people. And then there is the other version which says that Jesus was the first yogi, and so there is Christian yoga, and so on. So a lot of this distorted history of our culture goes on. There's a distorted chronology which says that Patanjali lived in the 4th century after Christ, and Gita came even after that. So Mahabharata was just very recent. So all this is fabrication, but people who have a lot of media power, who can spread these ideas, can confuse a whole generation of people. And so we have a generation, last generation or two, quite thoroughly confused. And basically, I can only do so much as one man. I'm doing my best. I need help. More people need to join me. But I'm trying my best to, argue against these kind of things. There is a very nice DVD called History of Yoga by Deepika Kothari and her husband Ramji in Bombay. They are very good filmmakers. It's about a 2.5, 3 hour DVD. It's a very nicely done history of yoga. I would recommend getting a copy and maybe showing it to people, or you can write to me and I can send you the link where you can get the copy. It's called History of Yoga. That's the DVD. It's a very long, 2 to 3 hours kind of DVD. It gives you a very good history of yoga.
Sir, you're mentioning about the occupational history of India. And today we have the announcement that India is a bigger economy than British. It was announced officially today. So my question is that this immense wealth creation, It was decentralized in the history of India. How can we make it again decentralized with this? Because maybe capitalism is centralizing the wealth creation process.
Yeah, it's a very, very good question. Capitalism is actually killing the Indian way of life.
Yes.
Because it is centralizing. By the way, it's not a big accomplishment that we've crossed Britain, because Britain is 1/10, 1/15 the size. So it is like, it's really sad that we are celebrating that a country of 1.3 billion is now crossed the tiny country like England. It is really sad. That means that our criteria for success is pretty bad. We should be comparing with China. Similar background, similar Asian country. We should be comparing with them on the size of the economy, and it should not be newspaper headlines that we have crossed, Britain. That's a very silly criteria. So your question on centralized versus decentralized. So if you have 1 lakh street vendors in a town, okay, so a lot of street vendors, they're selling different things. And that's their jati profession. Somebody's selling chola bhatura, somebody's selling, he's doing ironing. And you will find that the son will take over. That's their profession. It's nothing to do with being Hindu. It's just occupational profession transmits in that way. Now comes some supermarket chain, and they open a retail shop, and they are getting rid of these street vendors. They tell the government to pass laws against these street vendors. The police come and harass them, all kind of things. And the economy of scale of the retail outlet is such they can supply, in a more convenient way. They have cash registers, they take credit cards, they're air conditioned, all that stuff. So what happens to the street vendor is that his son does not want to continue being a street vendor. He'd rather go to the retail shop, become a clerk as a cash register, or doing inventory or cleaning. So his father used to be self-employed, his own owner, his own boss, did not work for someone else. He was a street vendor, selling chola bhatura, or selling whatever, some gadget, some little thing. But the son can't continue, it's no longer viable. He has to now take a job in a retail corporate structure. So he's got uniform, he's got a smartphone, he's into WhatsApp, he thinks I've become very modern. The point is he's a very low-level employee of a big corporation. And what used to be 1 lakh independent businesses is now one business with many branches all over town. And this one business, the ownership is Sensex. The shares are traded on Sensex. Small number of people own it, and lakhs of people are working there. Previously, it used to be lakhs of people each owning their own business. So what used to be 1 lakh small businesses are consolidated into one bigger business, and the ownership of this one bigger business is not in the hands of people who are working. The 1 lakh small vendors, everybody was his own worker and owner. Every rickshaw wala owned a rickshaw. Every tonga wala owned tonga. But Meru Taxi, the guy is just a driver of a big corporate. He's just an employee. He doesn't own it. So when you have this corporatization, people who are self-employed are no longer self-employed. They're displaced, they're employees, they can be hired, fired, kicked around here and there. They are given some modern symbolic things, but the control of their destiny for the rest of their career, they'll always be worrying, will my boss fire me? Will they do this? Will they do that? You become like a servant to somebody else. And then it gets even worse. Once Sensex is owning the stock market, is owning the company where these people are working, they will sell it to foreign direct investor, FDI, to bring FDI into the country. They will sell it to foreign people. So now the ownership has even gone overseas. So initially, 1 lakh vendors who were standing on the street, each one was shareholder of his own company. It was a sole proprietorship, he owned the company. Then it got replaced by a big shop where one guy owns it, all these people, their sons become workers, and then this guy puts it on Sensex because now he can make more money. Now the ownership are people who never visited this place, who don't know, they just looked at numbers from far away, they've looked at spreadsheets and numbers, they're financial manipulators, financial gymnastics to make money. And so they are managing it with the objective of how to maximize the income. They don't look at it as this is my family dhanda, this is my profession, this is what I do, I have to pass it on to my son. That is not how the business is being run. It's being run to maximize money very quickly. And then this investor lot sell off to some foreign people, and it gets even worse. So when you look at who owns Infosys, majority shares are not owned by Indians. You know that. Majority shares are not owned by Indians. Majority shares of a lot of companies are not owned by Indians. If you look at percentage of Sensex, all companies Sensex combined, how much is the percentage owned in India? Do you know what it is? It used to be less than 5%. It's now 30, 40. It's a huge percent of the Indian corporate sector economy is not owned by Indians. So we are gradually, if you look at the trend, we're owning less and less percentage of these big companies. The big companies, we are employees. So we're becoming Shudras, which means people supplying labor, but without owning equity in that company. We're becoming more and more Shudras, if you think about it. Nothing to do with Hinduism. What does Hinduism have to do with this? This is the modern economy. We are becoming Shudras, workers of companies with more and more percentage ownership outside. So the Vaishya, which is the owner, business owner, wealthy class, is outside. You see what I'm saying? Okay, if you consider Brahmin in today's world, it is intellectual property. The person who owns knowledge, intellectual property, that's the Brahmin. So you have tens of thousands of people working for Microsoft, but no Indian owns that software intellectual property. That software intellectual property is owned by Microsoft, which is a US company. So we are laborers. It's like brick laborers from poor village in Bihar. The guys who lay bricks, they come to Delhi and they make a house for a rich man. Okay, but the man who put in 500 bricks today, he does not own equity in anything. He does not own those bricks. He's just a bricklayer. So he's a bricklayer, so he can make some money, he can feel good, he's getting better salary than in Bihar, in the poor village. He was not able to wear trousers and get a smartphone and do all those things. He comes to Delhi, he feels that, he's become much bigger, better compared to his village friends. But at the end of the day, he doesn't own equity in the product he's making. He's making lines of code, lines of software, which are all property of Microsoft. He's just a bricklayer providing the labor. So it may be, people don't want to think of it that way, but most software industry in India is basically labor arbitrage, selling labor to somebody without owning any equity. That is the whole economy. So India is becoming Shudrafied. And this has nothing to do with India, with Hinduism. Please understand that. Every time a certain decentralized industry, like hand weaving, small farms replaced by big mechanized farms, small street vendors replaced by a huge supermarket. Every time lakhs and lakhs of small operators who are independently owned, self-employed, are replaced by a concentrated, centralized corporate structure, it is Shudrification. You should put all these social sciences people should say that is the Shudrizing of India. That is what the British East India Company did. They became the Vaishyas, owning the corporate wealth, the East India Company, turning all the Indians, whole lot of Indians, crores of Indians into their workers, Shudras. And then the intellectual property, when Macaulay said, replace the Sanskrit with English, we'll turn these into babus, working for us like our servants and shining our shoes, and we will be the bosses. The whole intellectual property became European owned. Steel making was an Indian specialty. Textiles was an Indian specialty. India was the exporter of these products like nobody else. Indian medicines were world known at that time. All of this got replaced with Europeans owning the intellectual property, so they became the Brahmins. They owned the wealth, so they became the Vaishyas. And when they took over the police from the king, when they took over the police and the army, all the Indian sepoys working for them, when the British East India Company took over the governance, they became the Kshatriyas. So if you own the governance, you're the Kshatriya. If you own the wealth, you are the Vaishya. If you own the intellectual property, you're the Brahmins. These three in the colonial system these are the social capital, these forms of social capital were owned by the Shudras. There's nothing to do with Hinduism. Do you see my point? So I'm glad you asked this question.
Namaste, sir. My question is, how do we teach spirituality to kids?
Well, first you teach yourself.
Yes, I'm trying to do
Yeah,
that.
yeah. So
for kids, like a simple way.
No, I'm saying first you teach yourself, you practice, and you let the children watch and join you. Whatever you are doing from a very young age, get the children involved. If you're doing asanas, let them get involved. If you are listening to some bhajans, let them get involved. Over a period of time, they'll understand better and better. But do not say that they have to first understand intellectually at a very high-flown philosophy. Don't wait for that. Start with rituals, start with asanas, start with chanting. Start with these things as early as you can, even when the child is in a womb. If they're listening to bhajans and music, it is good for them. You're spiritualizing even the unborn. And the moment the child comes out and is born as a person, if they're watching, there is entanglement of your consciousness and this child's consciousness, entanglement, and you're lifting the consciousness of that child. As the child gets a little bit older, then you can actually teach them routines. They can be starting to do these on their own. And like you teach them basic hygiene and brushing their teeth and so on, you teach them daily routine. So don't wait. A person, by the time they're 4 or 5, should become spiritually rooted. That is pretty mature, spiritually rooted. And then the things will happen on their own. But in our situation, people have been too busy surviving, making their ends meet. Parents are in the rat race. And so the children are not being given exposure to spirituality. And we are saying it should be done in the schools. But it should be done at home. Schools should do it too. You should put pressure on the schools. But you should not think that I am not going to do any of this. The school will take care of him, because it doesn't work. Child is learning from your lifestyle. You have a different kind of a lifestyle, child will pick that up, because they're smarter than we give them credit for.